Assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. I'm your host Hannah Zuberi and welcome back to another episode of Justice for All Now. Thank you for joining us on Muslim Network TV, America's only Muslim-focused network. You can always watch us 24/7 on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Roku TV, and Apple TV. Around a month ago, Americans with disabilities around the country celebrated the 30th anniversary of Americans with Disabilities Act, a historic act signed into law by President George H.W. Bush that represented the beginning of a journey into support and advocacy for people with disabilities. Since the signing of the ADA, we've seen the emergence of incredible disability rights advocates from all walks of life, fighting for equal representation and adequate resources for our fellow brothers and sisters with disabilities. Inclusivity has become a prime concern for many Americans with disabilities, and there are some wonderful people out there fighting for it. One of these people is Dilshad Ali, whose eldest son, who's actually, yes, an adult now, mashallah. He's past 18 now, 19 now, mashallah. Who, like she likes to call D in her writing, is affected by severe autism. Dilshad is a talented editor and journalist who has spent much of her career covering Muslim life in America with several different organizations, ranging from BeliefNet to Pathos and now Haute Hijab. In addition to her coverage of Muslims in America, she often writes candidly about how autism has influenced her life and the life of her family. She serves on the Autism Advisory Council of Virginia and works extensively with the Autism Society of Central Virginia. She serves on the board of advisors for Mohsin, and in an earlier episode, we had talked about Mohsin, and has moderated several panels at ISNA conventions covering disability rights, specifically in the Muslim community. In a celebration of her many accomplishments, she was awarded the Champion of Change Award at the White House during the Obama administration, a highly prestigious honor. She's here with us today for a Women in Justice episode to discuss her disability rights advocacy work and how it intertwines with family and faith. Welcome, the Muslimah next door, Dilshad Ali.
Assalamu alaikum, Hannah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I know you have a very packed, busy schedule. The schools have started, but I'm so honored that you're here. Please just share with us how I've watched your work over the years and just read your writings. You share some of the most precious moments in your parenting and your advocacy on your Facebook page, as well as your blog, The Muslimah Next Door. And it's really given, me a window into a family, and not just you, but your entire family, your children and their advocacy for their brother and others in the community, your husband, yourself. And mashallah, it truly seems like a family affair. So tell us more about how your advocacy started. When did you start writing about your journey as a mother with a child with disabilities?
Well, first I'll say that D, my eldest son, he's actually 20 now, just turned 20 about 2-3 weeks ago. Alhamdulillah. I remember when I had him, when I gave birth, and thinking about, this is how old I'm going to be when he turns 20, and here we are now. So it blows my mind, really. I'm sure it does for you too, when your children have their birthdays and you can't believe how old they are now. Mashallah, mashallah. I made this conscious decision to start writing publicly about our family life. I have to say it was a good 9 years ago, nine, 10, maybe even, yeah, about 9 years ago or so, around 2010, 2011. I was working as the Muslim editor at Pathos at the time.
Mhm.
Pathos is a multi-faith religion and news media site. And at the time I had joined them, I want to say maybe 6 months to a year before that, maybe 6 months as their editor of their Islam page, of their Muslim section. And I was charged with really building it from the ground up.
Mhm.
And in the middle of that, I was recommended that I start my own blog on the Pathos Muslim page, where I could cover any issues as I wanted to, do any reporting as I saw fit. If there were holes in any of our, coverage or reporting, that I could fill those holes in as I wanted to. So I set up the blog and I started writing, but I wasn't really writing on anything personal. It was more writing on different news stories, events, topics, things happening in the Muslim American communities across the country. And yeah, I remember specifically it was Ramadan, and we've had some pretty challenging years with D and our whole family, and then other years that were much more easier and went better. And we were in a particularly challenging year,
Mhm.
and there was just a lot of stuff going down with him and the whole family, because it's his life first and foremost, and it's his life. And I guess I would like to start the interview by saying that I never mean to be his voice. I never mean to speak for him. I mean, he has his own mind. He has his own way of communicating. He has his own thoughts and feelings upon things, and we don't always understand it well enough, but they're his. And so any work I've done, anything I've tried to write or advocate for, I try as best as possible to understand what his needs would be, and what would be good for him, and then for the community at large, for autism families at large. But I can't really speak for him. I
Mm.
think it's important to say that. And so it was Ramadan, and it was a very difficult time. And it was a very difficult day. I remember there was a particular day that was extremely difficult. Was going through he was going through a lot of self-injury, and I won't give a lot more details on that because it's his privacy. So, but he was going through a lot of self-injury, and he was maybe around 10 or so. And there was that happening. And it's Ramadan, so you're fasting and you're trying to lean into that. And there's iftar to be prepared, and there's my I was working part-time,
Mhm.
and but I had work to finish. And just the other children were much younger back then, so the others were like maybe 7 and 2 or 3 perhaps, the youngest. And still there are a lot to manage. I kind of reached a point where I never stopped fasting. I never stopped, the practices of Islam, but I wasn't feeling it. Like I was really struggling to feel it. I was really struggling to understand why everything that was happening, why was it happening this way? I don't think there has been a single person probably who hasn't at some time felt like, why is this the way it is? Why, right? So, and a lot of my whys were not even about why me or why is it so hard for me, but it was like, he's like a 10-year-old kid. Why does it have to be so hard for him? Like what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala trying to teach us through that means? It didn't make sense to me. So I was in a lot of pain, I could say. And so I wrote a piece. I wrote a piece about it. And I actually didn't even publish it on my own blog. We had a Ramadan specific blog that was being hosted by another writer, Wajahat Ali, at the time. He was hosting a Ramadan specific blog for that month for us, and where he was taking guest pieces. He was writing his own stuff and also taking guest pieces about all aspects of the month, personal stories, essays, all sorts of. It was a wonderful month of contributors. And so I wrote a piece and I sent it to him to put on that blog. So it was very Ramadan specific. And it really just kind of talked about how hard it is sometimes.
Mm.
And when you're not feeling the fast, and you're not feeling that connection, and you are questioning God, and
Mm.
you're asking why, and and it just doesn't feel fair, and it just doesn't feel right. And I really felt like I had to say it, and I had to say it for me. Like, I had to say it for me and for the family. And I was thinking, I can't be the only one. Like, there's no way. There's no way that I'm the only one. And the autism now it's like a 1 in 54 statistic. 1 in 54 children are diagnosed with autism in 2020. That's the latest statistic. Back then it was, I don't remember what it was back then. Maybe it was 1 in 128. I don't know. But that's pretty significant, whatever the number was. And, Muslims in America, we're a pretty significant population. So there has to be more than just me, than our family, right? And I wanted to know who else is out there, who's going through something like this. And, or if you are and you feel like you're not being heard, I want to tell you that you're being heard. I want you to know that, these things that we feel at different times in our parenting journey, in our family's journey, it doesn't negate our entire existence as Muslims. It doesn't negate what we're trying to do or what we're trying to be for Allah, or how we're trying to practice our faith. These are very human moments of despair. And it doesn't mean that your iman is weak. That's just how I felt about it. It doesn't mean, maybe in that moment your iman is weak, or maybe you're in that time period you're struggling, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're, a poor Muslim or what have you. I mean, this is a struggle that I think all of us go through, between us and between God, in different aspects, whether, you have a disability, or you love someone with a disability, or you're going through some other struggle, like the millions of struggle that people are going through in this world, right? This was our challenge. This was our life, not just a challenge. There's joy in this life too, but in that moment there was a lot of struggle. And I needed to say it. And I just wanted other people to know that you're okay. That it doesn't mean anything detrimental, that it's okay, that God is big enough to handle your despair. What is he there for if he's not there for that? Hannah, I think you're on mute.
So when you write, do you feel like your chest is lighter? Do you feel like you've gotten off your chest? Is it for at least for a little bit of time?
Yeah.
And that sharing stories one of the stories, things I've noticed is you have built a community of autism moms. I don't know if that's the term, but around yourself. And what has the impact of your writing been on yourself and on Dee?
It's hard to gauge the impact that it might be having on Dee. I have made it. It's been a journey for me. I look back and I read some of my early work, and I do cringe a bit. I feel like I, perhaps was oversharing at times, or perhaps I was, I should have been more sensitive to his needs and his privacy. I think anyone who engages in this kind of work will feel that, especially if the experience they're writing about is not just their experience, but the experience of somebody else. It's a very sensitive, challenging, in some ways tricky thing to do. A lot of people on the spectrum who are verbal, who are able to express themselves more, in a better way, will say, like, we don't need, parents writing stories about us. We don't need others saying things about us. We will speak for ourselves, and they should, and you should, and if Dee had the opportunity and the methods and the means to do it, I mean, I will happily enter the woodworks, and you say what you want to say, or don't say what you don't want to say, but that's not our situation. And it concerns me, or not. I don't know if it concerns me, but I guess I want to make sure that people on the spectrum like him, who are significantly affected, who they may be nonverbal, they're not non-communicative. I mean, he communicates with us. He has his ways. He knows how. He uses an electronic device. He has other methods. We understand each other. Our hearts understand each other. But let's face it, not everyone is his mom and dad and brother and sister. So there's a significant portion of the world who doesn't understand what he's trying to say or do often. And so I do feel it's important to speak up on about that, you know, while being respectful and keeping his privacy and his dignity and his respect and what his wishes are up there, right up there. And I ask him. I seek his permission before I say or write stuff. I try to, you know, I'm not perfect. Sometimes I'll write something and be like, hey, I should have asked him about that before I did that, you know, but and if you've been a follower of my work, you may have noticed as time has passed in the past couple of years, I've actually withdrawn a little bit. Like I haven't blogged as much anymore. I do still will write time to time on social media about different things, but I've withdrawn a little bit. And that's because he's older now, you know? And I get the sense that he, you know, doesn't want me to talk about a lot of that stuff anymore. Like talking about autism and disability rights and inclusion and sharing articles and commenting and working on advocacy work. Yes, him personally, a little bit less now. You know, it's kind of less now, and we should all, as parents, respect that. You know, for our kids, for sure.
And that's part of that growing up, that adulting. You know, now they're adults. Our children are adults now, and as mothers, we also need to learn how to let go of that. Especially mommy bloggers. You know how to and your situation is even, you know, like even more sensitive. So and I can, so I see this with my own children, where I remember a time where my son told me, no, you know, are you going to put that on Facebook? Are you going to blog about this? And I said, and then he's like, I don't want you to. And so that was when the time I stopped. And so, but even now, even when talking about with my children, it's very hard. Sometimes you want to share, but they are like, there's so many things that we have to learn how to, as mothers, and there are no blogs about this. There are lots of blogs for parenting toddlers and middle schoolers, but parenting adult children and adult children with disabilities, um, that one you need to start that one. That's your next project.
Yeah, that's a you know, there are some really fantastic writers out there who are paving the way and doing this work. If I may mention, there's one particular writer. Her name is Susan Senator. She has written a couple of different books on autism adulthood, and she shares stories about her son Nat all the time. And he's I mean, I don't want to comment on how significant his impairment is because I've had not met him in person, but I mean, I know he has his own sets of challenges, and maybe he's a little more verbal than Danish. It seems like to me, but I don't know for sure. But however, my point is that together they're, you know, I see their posts on social media, and in her writing, she writes for Psychology Today. So that is an area that I'd like to see more work in, and I'd like myself and others to transition to that because um, you know, when your child, if your loved one has a disability or any kind of significant disability and they turn 18, you have to petition the court to become their guardian. So you are petitioning the court for the right to, in a way, for the right to parent them still. And by that I mean, like, you know, being able to go to their doctor's appointments with them, to speak with their physicians, to help, perhaps to help handle their finances, or, you know, help them make other, you know, life decisions, all the different things that we take for granted as our children grow up and become more independent and take over control of their lives. And that's what we teach them to do, you know, to make decisions for themselves. And then we send them out there. And, you know, I really can't do that with Dee. And so I had to, you know, like many other families, we had to go through the whole process of petitioning and filing for, you know, guardianship, and in some instances conservatorship. We did that as well, you know, which is, you know, looking after his finances for him. And these are issues and these are things that should be discussed more, you know. And I know it can be done in a very respectful, honest and real way that is also, you know, takes into the account the person, you know, you're talking about, you're writing about. I mean, if they're able to contribute to their story, they should contribute. They should be the owner of their own story first, you know?
Was that process hard? What was it like going through that? Did you have guidance? Was it something that you were learning along the way?
So Yeah, I had guidance because I actually spent a significant amount of time learning about the process of guardianship. And there's a whole slew of things that happens when your child turns 18 that you don't even realize when you're parenting a neurotypical child. Neurotypical meaning, someone who's not on the spectrum, or it's quote unquote normal, for whatever that word means. We say neurotypical. Anyways, so there's a lot of things that happen that we don't realize as parents. I think, your child turns 18 in this country, and all of a sudden, you take them for a doctor's appointment, and you're not supposed to be in the room anymore. You don't have access to their medical records. You don't get to talk to their physician unless your child gives you permission to do so. That's how it works in this country. They take ownership of their own rights. That's how it works. And like, for example, your kid goes off to college. In high school, middle school, elementary school, we want to discuss a grade. We talk to the teacher, we make an appointment, we get to see their grades. They go off to college, they turn 18. You don't get to call the professor and say, can we talk about why, or what's happening with my, no, you don't get to do any of that, right? So there's a lot of, rights that automatically come upon you when you turn 18 that you don't think about. And so if you're, caring for or parenting a loved one, a child, a loved one, with some form of disability for which they need assistance, you have to petition the court to give yourself the right to keep doing that, which in some aspects feels so absurd. Like, now I got to seek the court's permission to do what I've been doing all along. Like, it feels a little insulting. However, I understand why it is that way and why it has to be that way. For us, Dee has significant disabilities, and it was kind of a no-brainer. For others, it's a much more, you have to put a lot more thought into it. What you're doing in taking guardianship and conservatorship, by the legal terms, is you're taking away their rights. And that feels very hurtful. And I think you'll understand that, Hina. You work for Muslim Matters, you work, you edit and write your whole life, and so have I. And so words are very important to me. They're so important to me. So when I'm going through my husband and I are going through the legal proceedings, to obtain guardianship, and the lawyers telling us that we're declaring him incapacitated, or we're taking his rights. Like, I'm like, no, he's not incapacitated. I don't want to take his rights away, but that's what you have to say and do to legally make this happen. And so it is very challenging, and and every person is different. Maybe others might not find it that painful, but I found it very, very painful. I found that year of him turning 18 to be a very beautiful and joyful and painful year. It was hard going through that process, and at the end of the day, it didn't mean anything. I know who we are. He knows who he is. We know what we mean to each other, but yeah, it's hard. And so, like other families, I sought training. I am very heavily involved with the Autism Society of Central Virginia, where I live. It's a chapter of the Autism Society.
And these pictures that we were just seeing,
that's pictures from our annual 5K team. We do a 5K. Well, this was the first year we didn't because of COVID, but we've been doing 5K teams with the Autism Society for 8 years now, for fundraising purposes and raising awareness. And so that was the picture is of our 5K team a couple of years back. Yeah. Very, very good memories, and I'll be looking forward to getting back to that when it's safe. So I sought a lot of training through the Autism Society. A lot of local families here, friends of ours, that's a lot of us did the same thing. Organizations like the ARC, the ARC has chapters everywhere. So the ARC has great trainings. The Autism Society has chapters everywhere. And I'm sure, wherever you are, there's probably one close by that will offer these kind of trainings, So it wasn't just about guardianship, but it's also about like applying for Social Security, applying for disability benefits. There's a whole bunch of steps you have to go through, to help your loved one, get the things that they are entitled to. That is their right to have, right? So, and anything that requires, legalities or understanding, a government system is a pain in the butt. It's very, very difficult. It never works smoothly. It requires a ton of paperwork, and it's never one-time paperwork. It's always annual paperwork, and it's just a lot of maintenance work, and it's all for a reason. I mean, nobody wants to scam the system. Nobody wants, to be applying for benefits if you're not due those benefits. And so you have to have these, systems in place, but it's hard. It's draining. It is. But we're past it. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. And so, what else can you? I'm really interested in learning what else do the society that you support, the Autism Society and the Autism Society of Central Virginia, what sort of resources, what other resources can parents with autism look, and what advocacy do they do? Where does it, what if people have issues, if they're being mistreated, if they're not getting the rights that they deserve by law? Can they go to these societies, and will they help them?
Yeah. So depending on what your need is, and these local chapters, they are run independently. So the trainings and the programs and the supports and the support groups and the things that we might have here at the Central Virginia Autism Society will be similar, but also probably a little bit different than what they might have at the Northern Virginia.
Okay.
The light came on here at the Northern Virginia Autism Society. And like I said, these chapters exist all around the country. So when I get random messages all the time, or people saying, "Hey, I have a cousin, or I have a sister, or I have so and so, I have a friend, and they their child just got diagnosed, or they need help with this," and so a lot of this is us having to do the work. I mean, I don't mean to be, stingy, with my time or with my answers, but we're all handling a lot. And these organizations and their work are in place to help us learn to advocate for ourselves, because at the end of the day, that's what we have to do. No one's going to do the work but you. And if your loved one is able to advocate for themselves, even better. There's groups like the autism, what is it, it's ASAN, Autism Self Advocacy Network. That fantastic group, for self advocates, because their motto, if I'm not mistaken, is nothing without us. Like, be the one speaking for us.
Exactly.
Of course, I mean, why would, if you're a cancer patient, why shouldn't you say what you need for yourself? Why should others be talking for you, right? So yeah, same thing. If you're able to communicate and to get across what your needs are, and to fight for what you want and how you want inclusion to look like, and what kind of supports would help you and others like you, we should be listening to you first. But others, loved ones, caregivers, support networks, parents, we're still involved as well, because, there's also those in the population who struggle to express themselves, like my son, and who, need significant amount of supports. And I don't want them to get lost in the system either, right? So you have ASAN, you have the Autism Society that has chapters everywhere. The ARC of Virginia is great. The ARC has chapters everywhere. Muslim is a national organization specifically to help Muslims with disabilities, not just autism, all kinds of disabilities. So they're national, and they have chapters growing now. They have a pretty good active one in Texas, Houston area. I think it's in Houston. There's a good one coming up in the DC area. The Chicago branch, which is, where Muslim started, they're just phenomenal. Mashallah, mashallah. So there's Muslim, like that. And, there's the Smile Network out in Canada. Smile's doing great work up there. And, National Autism Association. There's plenty. And they all have a ton of training out there to get you started. I think I saw a question. What is the ARC? The ARC of Virginia. The ARC is the Oh, why am I forgetting what my acronyms are now? But it's ARC. If
Okay,
anyone wants to look it up, it's ARC.
we can,
Um,
research can pull that up.
yeah.
So one of the questions our team wanted to know is, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about people, or when people meet a person with autism? What are some of the biggest misconceptions people carry? And throughout the years as a disability rights advocate, have you seen a significant shift towards more empathy in society for individuals with autism?
I definitely have seen a shift. I mean, D is now 20s, and I think we've been pretty public and active about this for more than a decade now. And I think the resources have grown exponentially. The discussion and talk about living on the spectrum has grown exponentially. The ownership by those who are autistic themselves of their own experience and that their voices should be front and center have grown exponentially. Has this, and within any community, it has brought controversy and it has brought, clashes as well. But that's because, I mean, we're growing and in ASD, autism spectrum disorder, it is just that. It's a spectrum. So it's like this wide, spectrum of people whose autism manifests in so many different ways, So you have my son who has significant support needs and is nonverbal, but not non-communicative. And then you have people who are higher, and these are labels. Nobody wants to use these labels anymore, but for the lack of a better descriptor, you have people who are higher functioning, who are perhaps mainstreamed, and can go to college and things like that. But they still have they still have support needs, perhaps they struggle with social cues and sensory problems, or it's different for different people.
I just saw a show on, I believe Netflix has a show on young people who are meeting it for marriage.
Yeah, I love
And
the show. Love on the Spectrum. So, it's funny, Netflix, during, this whole COVID quarantine period, there's been a couple shows that have become like these Netflix buzz shows that people talk about. So for a while, last month or so, it was, what was it? The Matchmaker, or matchmaking, about the matchmaking that comes out of India and among South Asians. And right around that time, Love on the Spectrum also dropped, which was about people on the spectrum seeking love, marriage, and relationships. And it came out of Australia, I believe. And I was like, I watched both. I'm not gonna lie, watch both, binge watch both of them, and told everyone I could, like, forget the matchmaking, watch Love on the Spectrum, because, like, the unfiltered, real, it's amazing. I mean, it's very raw, it's very unfiltered, it's very real, it's very touching, and it just really shows you what it's like, to want to be in a relationship, to want to be in love, to want to get married, and seeking that, and not like falling for all the games and all the things that other people go through when they try to, seek marriage and relationship and love. And yeah, great show. I want more seasons.
We'll let Netflix know, right?
Yeah.
We should. It would be lovely to have something, that we think about Muslim media, things like that, really covering lives of Muslims. Wouldn't that be amazing, right?
I would love to see, like, for example, Muslim has, they started a partnership, and I wish I could remember the group they started a partnership with. Maybe it was Half Our Deen, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I'm accurate in saying that. But, like, in helping people who with various disabilities, seek partners, seek marriage. I mean, it's unfortunately there's still too much, stigma and too much judgment. If you're divorced, or if you have a disability, or maybe you have a chronic illness or something, and, well, why can't you be married? Why can't you have a family? You can, you can. And so it's really nice. I would love to see more stories about that.
For Muslims, the global deaf Muslims, they do gatherings where people gather, and I've seen many couples come out of that. And I have cousins myself who are deaf, and they're married, and mashallah, it's a beauty, like that. Why we do limit love to able-bodied, thin, pretty white people. I mean, so a lot of us do that. So
We're not like that. We're so different.
exactly. So it is, subhanAllah, that is. Now, let's talk a little bit about your advocacy. So I really want to, because you've been through this, you've been uh, doing this when many others are so overwhelmed with the work that they already have to do,
Yeah.
taking care of their loved ones.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to share the lessons that you've learned through the work that you've done around the state, around the country, covering disability rights, working on the councils, and the different organizations that you're involved with, making space more accessible, inclusive, but also what other lessons like have you, through the years that you've learned, that maybe mistakes that others have made that perhaps they can learn from the lessons.
I think, a few of the lessons that I've learned personally along the way that I think are applicable to our communities at large is, when it comes to, autism specifically, but disability in general. One of the mantras that I really hold dear now is that there's no timeline on progress.
Mm.
There's no timeline. We have kids and we start going to the pediatrician and there's these milestones that we're supposed to hit, right? And if you don't hit those milestones, that's when you start to, your doctor will, discuss developmental delays or this or that. And so you need those as markers, to be able to know if there's some help that your child might need, more than a neurotypical child. But at the same time, there's no timeline on progress, So what, you know, what someone might achieve in their 20s, which is what a neurotypical person might achieve when they're 5, that could be the case, but they've learned a skill.
Mm.
Like, so one of the things I've learned is that, I'd never count out what somebody can learn and how someone can grow. And so we were having this discussion around the dinner table at my house a couple nights ago. The kids are asking my husband and I about what period in their life did we enjoy the most? Like, did we like them? Did we love the baby period? Did we love the toddler? Did we? And I was like, no, I really like I told them, I said, I really like the teenage period. I feel like I was born to be a mom of teenagers, young adults, and adults. And, the little kid stuff was great, cute. I loved it, but this is what I really like. And so my daughter asked me, like about D, like what period in his life did I, was really that I enjoy the most. And I didn't know how to answer that because at every stage there have been struggles. And at every stage there has been wonderful stuff. But where you're like one stage of life with your kid is really beautiful and you're like, oh, it was so great and whatever, it's just been a ball of good and challenging and hard and heartbreak and joy and love and loss of faith and gaining of faith the entire time, right? And so, but what I remember out of that is that, another thing she said was, I feel like he's more autistic now than he was when he was younger because he had more speech when he was younger. And then we shifted to focus on his electronic communication device. He uses Prologue to Go on his iPad, and his verbal speech, she's right, his verbal speech, has gone down. It never was that significant, but it went down a lot more. And I can see where that might come from, that thought. But then I was also thinking to myself, yeah, but he can do this now and he's doing this now. And he's like so much more connected to us as a family now, We used to engage in like sibling therapy and stuff so that D would learn that he has brothers and sisters and that we're a family and we should be together. Because there was all of this like him over here and us over here. And that's not what I wanted as a mom. And so I'm thinking to myself, but you know what? We eat dinner together every night. Like there were years when he couldn't eat with us, we may not be able to travel and go on trips and yeah, we can't, do a lot of things out in the community as a family that we might want to, but we do a lot of other stuff together. And he is communicating, stuff on his iPad to us together. And we have family in jokes that we didn't used to have, like stuff that is just hilarious to us. And we have, I don't know, there's just all these different things that I've seen progress on. And yeah, there are things that we've lost along the way too. But in my head, it was like, yeah, there's no timeline on progress, And I think that that's one thing I would want anyone, I think people who are autistic, they know this about themselves already. And I think families should know that too, that you feel like there's this window, when your child is diagnosed, a lot of times we're talked to about a window of, early intervention and therapy. And it's like you're trying to pack so much into your day. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I mean, early intervention is important. The science does show that, right? But at the same time, I don't feel like there's a window that closes. I really don't. I feel like progress happens over the course of your lifetime. And D, where he is now, will probably be different than D, where he is in a decade when he's 30, and there'll be other gains. There might be some other losses, but there will continue to be progress. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned and fought to hold on to, because sometimes I lose my grip on it. And I think that's important when families come to me and ask me about that, about what's it like now. Like I remember running into, just about a week or two ago, I had to go in for some blood work. So I'm at one of those LabCorp offices, and there's a mom with her two kids and someone, maybe her sister, somebody outside, waiting, because I could tell right away their daughter was on the spectrum. And she was very upset. I mean, it just brought back all the memories of like trying to do blood work with D, and like it was just so hard. It still is so hard. I mean, blood work is very difficult for him. And so anyways, they're waiting outside, until it's time for them to go, and then they'll go in. And so I paused outside and I said, hey, I'm sorry to be nosy, but I could tell your daughter, she's on the spectrum, right? And they're like, yes, she is. And I said, oh, so is my son. He's much older now. I said, I just want to let you know, I know this looks really hard, but you're going to be okay. And she's like, oh, how old is your kid? And I said, he's 20. And she's like, well, how is he now? Like, really, how is he now? And I was like, God, I don't know how to answer a question like that. Like, how is he now? Like, yeah, he's talking. He's great. We overcame everything. No, it's not like that. It's not like that. But you know what? He's good. He's good. We're good. Alhamdulillah. I mean, we've embraced what our life is. And he's good. And it's hard. And it's not, and our normal is not anyone else's normal. And I would imagine if someone else walked into our life and tried to live it, they'd be like, oh my God. But hey, it's our life, alhamdulillah,
And that's the thing. There's no, except for, and that's what it's subhanAllah, even with faith, that's not what Allah judges
right.
you on. We make these assumptions. We make that this is what a perfect life looks like. But we know that perfection is only for Allah, and it's, and that's what Jannah is for. And sometimes that helps, but sometimes it's hard to get to that point. And your writing reflects that, and it helps others who perhaps might be struggling with smaller struggles or bigger struggles. And that's one powerful way that, you have, a lot of times people think advocacy looks a certain way too. And they don't, when I read your writing and then I see like this, the normalization of that life, that's advocacy. That's, building that space for families to be themselves. And subhanAllah, that is
and
just
it's interesting
amazing.
for you to say that, because I think, I don't know about you, but we all suffer to some extent from imposter syndrome. And so sometimes, like, for example, when, you guys asked me to be on the show, and I was like, okay, but like, there's like a lot of other people doing, they're rewriting laws, and they're, making their messages more inclusive. And I work on that stuff too. Yes. We all, in our own spaces work on it in small ways, significant ways, through some of my work with the Virginia Autism Council or the Virginia Autism Project. There's definitely been bills and different groups and different, initiatives that I've worked on and helped move the needle on. But mostly I just write and I share. And you're right. It really is like taking it out of the corners and bringing it into, the main part of the table and saying, you know what, this is our life, and this might be your life too. And there might be a version of it that's your life also and your life also. And we don't need to be quiet about it. If you want to be quiet about it, that's fine too, because I also talk to different people, different families who come to me for advice, and sometimes I, tell them, you're going to get further if you make more of a noise, but they want to be quiet. They want to be private about whatever it is they want to be private about, and that's fine too. But also, talking about it, I think, is good.
And we saw this too, like even the because of people like you, especially in the Muslim community, who have it takes courage to talk. Because of that, a lot of I've personally, in my reporting in the Muslim community, have met parents, families who would be shunned, who would be shunned from their communities, who would be shunned from the mosques, who would be shunned from just themselves didn't understand what was happening to them or what was happening with their child. And it was some I've met mothers who have expressed that this is like, I wish I didn't have to do this. And because of your work and because of others like you, Mohsin, and the fact that these families now feel that they're part of the community, they're part, it's okay, it's, and that empathy and that all of that doesn't come unless someone shines a light. These, like we said, words are important, but this is a mirror, like holding this up and be like, that's us, right? So, subhanallah, that is something that I really admire about your work. The pandemic is here, and this is something that I wanted to ask you. What are the sort of things that we need to be as an organization that's concerned with human rights, with rights of people who a lot of times maybe are not like we when we advocate for people that a lot of times aren't here. We're not advocating for them because, or they're not voiceless. They have voices, but their voices have been suppressed. So what do you think that can be done? What are the spaces that people need to put their focus on, especially under the pandemic? Kids are going back to school, some of them, as family with someone with autism. What are some of the things that you think that the community should be really focusing on, and organizations?
I think there's a lot of confusion and a lot of clarity that needs to come out about how students with special needs, whether autism, Down syndrome, whatever, myriad of disabilities, um, how are they going to be educated under COVID? I mean, a lot of our schools were shut down, and we had some sort of virtual learning or whatever last spring, but like it's really starting in earnest. And how are IEPs going to work in this type of a school year? What is the ideal laws, like how is that going to apply now?
Mm.
If we're out of, how will support services, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, vision therapy, what have you, how is that going to work? Because a lot of these things for different students in this population, they don't work virtually. You need to be able to do it hands-on. It's hands-on learning for a reason. But how do you do hands-on learning in a situation like COVID? In the way that illness is spread and contagion and all that stuff. Um, those are ongoing questions and things that we need to address. And I think every school district is struggling across the country. The rules and the laws and the decisions being made are from, like, even here where I live, from one school district to the one next door are different. Some are going back, on some sort of hybrid model. Some are going back fully virtual. And then, some are making decisions that the only people or the only students who are going to be allowed back in the classroom are those with significant needs who need hands-on learning. Well, how's that going to look and how's that going to work? I think that's an area where we need to be, doing more research on. We need to dig into our advocacy in that line. We need to have, a lot of conversations with our school districts and our special ed teams in school, and make sure that we're advocating for the best that we can get for our kid. We also need to understand that this isn't this is just kind of a no-win situation. you're not going to get everything you want, and nothing is going to be fully safe at the end of the day. I mean, I have my, my eldest who should be in school. His school did open, but I chose to keep him home. I felt like that was a safer decision. And even though virtual learning, I mean, he's okay, but it's really, I mean, he would do so much better to be back in his routine and back with hands-on learning. And for sure, special services like OT and speech and stuff, just they don't translate well for him personally, through a virtual means. But we're trying to carve our path. And so whereas I was able to kind of let down a bit on advocacy in the school system with him the past year or two because I kind of gotten where I needed to get. No, I'm back up again because it's a brand new landscape where everyone's kind of making it up as they go along. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but that is where we are. We are having to come up with solutions like this, and it's hard on the heart because I feel like, our students with special needs and various disabilities are kind of thought about last, and they shouldn't be, right? So get it, stay strong and keep pushing on.
Wow. No, this is, thank you so much for being here. We've wrapped up the hour, but I am so, and you are a woman in justice. We absolutely, we need to remind ourselves and each other of just how amazing we are. So yes, alhamdulillah. So no imposter syndrome. I am absolutely honored to have you here and have the world know about you and your work. Please follow Dilshad at Patios and Muslima Next Door. That's her blog. Read about her story. She also covers religion news service and hijab. So many of her writings are there, and she's editing their fashion blog as well. But it's not a fashion blog. Every sort of Muslim specific topics are covered. So thank you so much for being here, Dilshad.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum to our guests and to our audience. Inshallah, we'll see you soon. And don't forget to call President Trump and ask him to call the genocide a genocide. The Uyghur genocide is a genocide. Assalamu alaikum.